Welcome back to the second episode we're recording this week. I'm excited. Yesterday we had Amanda Schuer, who's the Strategic Director of Maintenance for Jetco Delivery and the Chairman and Treasurer for the American Trucking Association's Technology and Maintenance Council. I love maintenance. I love transportation, but I really love talking to interesting people. And my friends, I have a treat for you today. This merger, the merger between Forward Air and Omni Logistics, has been all over the news for the better part of a year at this point. And my gosh, has it been a roller coaster ride. And I'm so excited to break down this entire thing for you today, live. But I'll be joined by one of my favorite thinkers in all of supply chain, all of logistics, and really just an overall amazing guy, Brittain Ladd. Brittain will be here momentarily. But before we can jump into the live coverage and discussion of this incredible merger, I got to say some thank yous. I got to say some call outs to some friends who helped make this whole thing possible. DAT, Dial a Truck, DAT, Freight and Analytics. Since 1978, DAT or DAT has been helping truck drivers make it home safely with loads all across the country. You look, there was a time before the electronic load boards, before all of the technology that was pervasive in the industry today, where if you needed to find something to move, you had to go to the travel center and you had to look at a board. And on that board, that load board, were all of the things you could move and the amounts of money you could get paid for doing that. Safely delivering freight on time and undamaged is difficult even under the best circumstances. But it is especially difficult if you don't know where you're going and you don't know what you're moving. So DAT has been helping truckers, again, since 1978. If you're new to DAT, you can save yourself 10% by using a promotional affiliate link in the show notes on the podcast itself. That is a little bit of a plug for our friends at DAT. Now, I want to talk to you about the world of less than truckload. Now, before there was LTL, before there was truckload, there was just trucking. And as time went on, parts of the business got pulled off and became other segments. The LTLs ended up becoming smaller niche players moving very specialized freight. You had the truckload carriers where a box was filled with just one person's stuff. It's important for you to understand what actually LTL is. Now, I'll be honest, I'm no Curtis Garrett. I'm not going to help you understand LTL. But what I can do is explain to you just how challenging it is to cube out or weigh out that box. LTL moves the world, and it is one of the most difficult things you can do. Forward Air is a $2 billion a year publicly traded less than truckload provider. Fantastic organization, fantastic company. Omni Logistics was and is a freight forwarder, a freight broker of sorts. And what they would do is coordinate with different companies all across the globe and helping them get products to the United States and other places. Now, the thing about Forward Air and Omni is that they've been working together for many years. And I want to explain that relationship a little bit here. And to help give some kind of understanding, maybe a visual of what it is that I'm talking about, let me explain. So I'm very clear here. I want to make sure that the story I'm about to tell is going to help you break down and understand exactly what this deal is about. I'll also do a quick plug here. F3 memes. Craig Fuller challenged us all to create memes in order for us to get a golden ticket to F3. And I have been trying my best, my very best, to get there. I will post this meme again. I posted it before later this afternoon, but that is what it is. Now, let me say as I go through this, this is probably not the best illustration of this merger. This may actually be the best illustration of the merger. Here's how it works. Omni Logistics is out there finding freight to move. They then call or contact or work with a provider to move that freight. This is exactly what was happening before the merger took place. The largest customer for Forward Air was in fact Omni Logistics. And it was in March of 2023 that Forward Air approached the team at Omni, and they looked to do a merger. Now, Omni Logistics was privately held, backed by a private equity fund called Ridgemont, and they were not actually up for sale. But in the world of corporate mergers and acquisitions, anybody could, in fact, be up for sale if the price was right. And so these two entities began negotiations, and in fact, a deal was struck. A merger agreement was signed sometime in, let's say, August of 2023. Now, this is the part that's very difficult to explain, and we're not going to get into all the nitty gritty of what exactly happened in the litigation that led up to the merger, but I'll say this. The deal was structured in a way where shareholders of Forward Air were not allowed to vote. In fact, it was a deal struck in a way where the shareholders of Forward did not have a say in the deal, but ultimately the board of directors for both companies wanted this thing to happen. Now, there's good reasons sometimes why you might not want shareholders to participate in an acquisition. For example, these things are typically very fast. They happen quickly. If you have to have a shareholder vote, it may delay the process, and it may give a surprise to the market where you're not able to actually consummate the deal. Well, here's what happens. Because of the way the deal was initially structured, in order to not have a vote in for their shareholders, some of the shareholders sued. And those shareholders said, I want to have a say. I want to have a say. And I get it. I get it. I understand. And they sued to stop the merger in Tennessee. Well, at the time, I was on the FreightWaves program, and we talked about this. And the reality at the time, and what it ended up being the case, was that injunction would ultimately be dissolved. It would be taken away because there really wasn't a right for shareholders to vote on the Forward Air deal merging with Omni. And ultimately, it was dismissed. But it was during this time, let's say, I don't know, September and October of 2023, maybe even to November, where the idea of the merger became less compelling for certain shareholders. And as a result, many people said, let's stop the deal. Let's pause. Let's make it not happen. Ultimately, Omni Logistics pursued a thing called specific performance in the Delaware Chancery Courts. For those of you non-lawyers out there, Delaware Chancery is like the Madison Square Garden of corporate litigation. I'm telling you, if you're going to litigate anything in business today, the Delaware Chancery Court is a pretty interesting spot to do it. Ultimately, right before it was set to go to trial, the merger was agreed upon. The deal was consummated. Now you have a $1 billion freight brokerage and freight forwarder in Omni combined with a $2 billion less than truckload provider, Forward Air, giving you synergies and giving you reach that you never had seen before. Now, I'll be very candid here. If you are an enterprise shipper, if you're a manufacturer, if you're somebody out in the world and you have not talked to Forward Air following this merger, oh, buddy, I would suggest you do that because the combined entity offers far more than either one of them could have individually done. In the world of M&A, we look at 1 + 1 needs to be 3. Is there some synergies? Is there some value to be unlocked? Now, the share prices of Ford have still continued to be in a really kind of tenuous spot. I think that has to do more than anything with the chaos and the noise around the deal. Let me be clear. When that deal was struck back in August of 2023, that deal was going to happen. There was no way to pull the brake and pull this thing off. This was the path it was going to go. Just like we had that same kind of conversation not terribly long ago between Elon Musk and Twitter, where Elon himself said, I don't want to buy it. And then he ended up buying it. And now it's still doing what it's doing. I do think at the end of the day, this is a great deal, but who am I? I'm just a lawyer. I'm an armchair attorney. I'm a podcaster. I love to talk about business, but sometimes you have to get an expert. And oh, my friends, we have a terrific expert here to talk with me today. Let me welcome back to the show, friend of the show, great friend of mine personally, Brittain Ladd. Brittain, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? And I'm dying to meet this expert.
You are, without a doubt, one of the most prolific writers in supply chain logistics, transportation generally. But for those of the folks who are watching us or listening to the podcast, who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Brittain Ladd. My background's very heavy in all things supply chain logistics. I've worked for multiple consulting firms. I'm a former Amazon executive. And what I do is I work with companies on their strategy, on really what should they be doing in terms of competing, entering new markets. And a big thing that I do is mergers and acquisitions. And along the way, I started to write about the things I was doing, and it generated a lot of interest. So I continue writing. I write posts on LinkedIn. I write articles for Forbes. I write articles for other publications. I have my own website, BrittainLadd.com. Well, really what I try and do most of all is just share my knowledge and just educate people. And really, I like to take positions on certain issues and show people that it's okay to take a position on something that other people may not support, or take a position on something, and it's okay if people criticize you about that. So I've been successful in doing that, and it's led me to meeting some great people just like you, Matthew.
I love when you make a post or make an article and you say, this is what they should do, just like I recommended X amount of months ago or X amount of years ago. So you're one of these rare people that can look through the tea leaves. You can see the forest through the trees. You can see what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. You call out executives when they're making mistakes in real time, like calling out unforced errors. When you think about a merger, like why would a company want to have a merger? Why would a company look for increasing their footprint? What's the value in doing something like that?
Well, you really hit on the key word, value. The only reason why any company should make an acquisition or have a merger is that somehow it's generating some type of value for the single entity or the combined enterprises. So, for example, you look at Amazon. Amazon acquired Whole Foods because Amazon really didn't have a physical grocery capability. And they knew that they needed to do that. And I was the first person to recommend it to Amazon to acquire Whole Foods. And I wrote several years, in 2013, I wrote a research report. And I made the argument that Amazon, because they can only do online, they're going to be the easiest grocery retailer to basically quash by the leading physical-based retailers, because Amazon had no stores. And so a lot of people criticized me and said, well, that's silly. Amazon would never buy a grocery retailer. I said they have no choice, because the way consumers shop is they prefer to go to a store. Over 65% of consumers say they prefer shopping in a store. So there was no way that Amazon, by selling groceries online, was ever going to become a major player in groceries. They had no choice. And so as part of my research, I came up with 3 companies for them to acquire, either H-E-B, Sprouts, or Whole Foods. I recommended Whole Foods. Amazon kind of came to that conclusion on their own as well in 2017. And so Amazon made that work. They acquired Whole Foods. Now, that was an acquisition. Whole Foods operates as Whole Foods. They kept their name. Mm-hmm. Other companies will merge, and so one name goes away. They just basically merge everything about that company. And when they merge, they get increased pricing power across the supply chain. They consolidate to the logistics networks across the supply chains. And that's why when you hear someone talk about M&A, they'll say, well, there's all these synergies. Now, that may be true, but the biggest falsehood in most M&A is also the synergies. A lot of companies don't think it through, and that's why you hear these horror stories about how companies have merged and nothing really good came about, and that's because they didn't truly think through what it was they wanted to accomplish with the merger.
I think you brought up some really important points here. It's more than just bolting on EBITDA. It's more than just bolting on EBITDA and saying, look at the success we've unlocked. I think what you hit on was this idea of you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. When I was working with a company called Cox Automotive, we made the acquisition after my time, but we put the deal together initially with a company called FleetNet, which is one of the best breakdown providers in the United States. And the reality was, if you wanted to be in that space, you wanted to compete at the highest levels, you don't have a choice in the moves you get to make. And I look at Forward Air as a less than truckload provider. Who are they up against? FedEx Freight. They're up against Old Dominion Freight Line, Saia, Estes. These are behemoths, incredibly profitable organizations. And if I'm Forward Air and I'm looking at how do I differentiate myself, how do I add value that can be ultimately something a catalyst for the growth of my business, I look at an acquisition of maybe my customer, someone like Omni Logistics. So let's look at this deal. What do you think about Omni and Forward combining? What is your initial thought of this thing?
Well, it's interesting. And for those of you who don't know, I've worked when I got out of the Marines and earned my bachelor's, my first job out of college was working in the trucking industry. So I moved into LTL. So I've worked with Old Dominion Freight Line, Saia, Estes, Yellow Freight when it was here. I've done tons of LTL. And so I knew exactly who Omni was. I knew who Forward Air was. And when I became aware that they were talking about merging, my first reaction was, this is actually a brilliant move. Now, personally, I thought CEVA Logistics was going to acquire Omni or Forward Air, or somehow CEVA was going to work out a deal to say, I'm going to buy both of these and they'll fall under the CEVA network.
I could see that.
Because CEVA's really good at what they do. But I read through everything and I'm like, this checks all the box of what makes an intelligent merger. In fact, it was so good that I stepped back and I'm like, well, Brittain, why didn't you write about this sooner? But I don't really write much about the LTL industry. It's more of a niche market for people who follow it. But I think it's a brilliant move. I'm surprised that the shareholders raised the flag that they did. They tried to stop it. I thought that was a really silly thing on their part. But I think this is brilliant. I mean, I really have to give it to the team for putting this together, because the amount of advantages they're going to have through this is great. But here's why I love it most of all. Because if I'm running the combined companies, 2 years from now, I'm putting this thing on the market. And I'm going to see, so who might want to acquire us now because we're combined? And I think there's some really interesting opportunities for some large companies to say, we're going to buy these companies now. We're going to buy this combined entity because they've integrated. They're using the same platform on all this. But that
it could very well be CEVA at that point.
Well, CEVA is one of them. DSV was another. I was looking at Maersk. I thought was an interesting one for them because they're trying to get so much into the last mile. And I thought, wow, this would be a great one for them. But I also thought maybe Amazon would be looking at something like this as well. So I don't think that there's enough people who are saying, well, okay, it's good. I see it working. But they're not going, well, wait a minute. This doesn't mean that they're not going to turn around and sell themselves in 2 or 3 years. And I think it should be no more than 2 to 3 years from now that they would look at doing something like that.
What I love about the deal myself is that Omni was also working with other LTL providers. And one of the biggest things you can try to do to build the moat around your own company is making your competitors into customers. Now, I can see there's still going to be some trepidation over time, but the way that Omni conducts itself and the way that this deal will ultimately, I think, play out is it's going to show that a fully integrated LTL that also has tentacles in other trucking companies is going to be very, very useful for everybody. Ridgemont is a phenomenal operator. There's no doubt in my mind as a shareholder within Forward, they're going to add some significant value. I'm just fascinated by this deal. Like I was talking to a friend of mine, a mutual friend of ours, Jason Miller, and I think this case is going to end up in both legal textbooks and business textbooks because so many things happen to get us to this point. How long does it take to integrate a company? Like what's a reasonable time frame for something like that to happen?
So here's the challenge anytime you want to integrate companies. It's managing the change. So everyone calls that change manage it. What I say to executives is you're going to fail if you can't manage the change. The change will not happen on its own. It has to be managed. So you have to step back and say, well, as a single company, This is how company A was organized. Company B was organized this way, but we're going to combine these. So what's the new operating model? What's the new organizational structure? What are the defined roles and responsibilities? So you have to work out all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Then it has to be, so let's evaluate the systems each company is using. And usually what you find is there's multiple systems, lots of homegrown stuff that's just worthless to try and integrate. So then you have to look at it and say, maybe we tear out 2 or 3 of these systems and we bring something in off the shelf, or we actually take our platform and we customize it some more. That's going to take anywhere from 6 to 9 months on average, sometimes a year. You can oftentimes still start the integration process even when you're doing that. But the rule of thumb I say to companies is that it will take you a minimum of 1 year to truly integrate. And integrate means, again, reducing headcount, getting rid of redundancies, redundant job titles and everything like that, reorganizing in terms of, so how do we organize to where we're now leveraging the strength of both companies? Then it's a matter of integrating the supply chains. You know, most companies have their own facilities. So when they combine, now you have extra facilities that often you don't need. So you have to divest those. Then it's a matter of running network optimization and saying, well, now that we're a combined company, we really need a network that looks like this. And that may mean investing in opening up warehouses where none exist. That can take 1 to 2 years easily, or will take 1 to 2 years easily. And so an integration usually isn't something where you say, we're starting January 1st and December 31st will be done. No, it's usually you go in phases. And the phase I think that's most important is the organizational structure. If you're going to do terminations, get those out of the way as fast as possible so that the people who are there know we're there to build a new enterprise.
Let me ask you this, like practically, right? We have these 2 entities that were going to combine, then they weren't going to combine, then they were forced to combine. You have teams on different, levels of how they think about the deal. How do you go forward? I mean, you can't unwind it. It's happening. How do you get people to start, rowing in the same direction now that we have the future clearly identified as a going concern?
So it's interesting. So when I manage projects like this, or when I lead projects like this, what I'm always looking for is, who are the resistors? Who are the ones that behind the scene are like the insurgents that are just trying to derail everything? You want to identify who those individuals are as fast as possible and fire them. And the reason why you have to fire them is because they've talked to so many people in their company. The other resistors have talked to so many people in their company. And you want to make sure that you set the right tone, that we're not going to tolerate individuals trying to derail something that we know as a fact is best for our company and best for our employees and best for our shareholders. So you want to fire those individuals that are causing the most friction. And then you want to make sure that you're fair, and who are you choosing to then take leadership roles. So you don't want to play one company off against another. You want to selectively but fairly identify individuals from both companies and say, you're now part of the solution for how you're going to help us integrate. You want to bring those stakeholders on, and you want to make sure that every chance you get, you're constantly communicating to everyone internally. This is what we're doing, how we're doing it. This is how successful we've been. These are the changes we've made. These are the changes we're making over the next couple of months. You want to eliminate any chance of people internally, the employees, saying, I wish I knew what was going to happen. You want it to be where you bore them to death with so many details.
That's right. That's right.
But it gives them a level of confidence that, you know what, I can be invested here. There's nothing worse. Nothing will kill an integration or a merger faster than when individuals don't know where they belong, what's going to happen. So when JCPenney brought in a new CEO, Ron Johnson, the mistake he made is he was just saying, we're going to do all this and that. We're going to divest some things and make some mergers, all this. But he wouldn't really explain, so how do all of the people who are there at the moment, what role do they play? And instead, he just started firing people several months later, and he kept on firing people. And so the culture in the company was everyone started looking for a way out. And they were never really able to accomplish anything special in the company because nobody believed they had a role there. So very basic, understanding the needs of people, over communicate, and you usually have a much better opportunity to have a successful integration.
Nothing gets people to be, to disengage more than the uncertainty of the future. I think this is that critical time for Forward Air to eliminate that uncertainty, unequivocally embrace the merger and the people that are going to drive this thing forward. Do you look outside? Do you look internally? Where do you find the people that are going to be the champions of this thing?
Well, in a case like this, between Omni and Forward Air, I think they need to make sure they have some resources from the outside. And the reason why is because of the friction.
Mm-hmm.
You know as well as I do, there's a lot of mistrust. There's a lot of friction in there. And so having someone who is an unbiased, independent third party who has taken a leadership role in working with both companies, having this merger be successful, that I think is going to be very helpful, because it allows people to go to them and vent and know they're not going to get fired for it. Because the third party, the consultant, whoever they bring in, whether it's a firm or one person or whatever, they know that there are going to be people coming to them saying, if only they would have listened to me 6 months ago or 2 years ago, or we tried that 3 years ago and it didn't work. I told Bob there was no way that software was going to be good for this company. He or she's going to have to listen to that. But then they can say, I appreciate the fact you told me that. Now, here's what our plan is. What do you think about this? And it's a really unique skill set. And it was one I didn't have when I first started doing this. I had to learn really how to work with individuals who were just as irate as could be, but then quickly get them to pivot to where they were an ally and were supportive. And I've seen that most of the time you bring in someone from outside to help lead something like this, but you do want to find the individuals internally who you are basically grooming them for bigger and better things. If you can't find individuals like that in the company, then it's a signal for you that, you know what, we have to start hiring more people. Mm-hmm. And you start bringing in people who've either been through this before at other companies, who are from a competitor, or from a company you admire and you want to introduce that culture. You cannot wait, though. The worst thing you can do is say, well, this will work itself out. No, you have to manage the change. And this is where I see so many companies make a mistake. They think things will work out. People will find a way to get along. And no, they play a happy face when executives are around, and behind the scenes, they all protect their territory. Yeah. So they've got to have someone who can say, these 5 people need to go. We need to bring in these type of people with these skills from outside. And this is how we're going to do the leadership structure. This is how we're going to do the project management structure. And this is how we're going to make this successful. But it's just someone has to be able to say, this is what it takes. And someone has to make the tough decisions.
The enemy of progress is inertia. And I think what's going to happen over the next few weeks and months is going to be absolutely fascinating. Brittain, I'd like to come back to this. Let's put a little flag out, maybe in 3 months, maybe 4 months, maybe 6, to do a little recap on how we've seen this thing develop. I mean, again, this is probably the most interesting merger in supply chain that I've seen in over a decade. And there's no doubt that this is going to be a dynamic organization with the right leadership. Ultimately, I think shareholders win. What do you think? Do you think shareholders win in this deal?
Well,
time will tell.
The unknown.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm telling you, even though I support this merger and you support it, I don't think the average person realizes how easy it's going to be for this to fail and fail miserably. Because you now have to take these 2 companies, and you cannot maintain the status quo in either one. You now have a new company. That means you have to understand, so what's our goal? What is it we're going to deliver? What's our 1-year strategy, our 2-year strategy, our 3-year strategy? What additional mergers and acquisitions should we be making? Because if all they do is say, well, we're just going to keep everything as is, we're just together as one big happy family, everything will disintegrate. And so now this company, where I say the CEO had better think big and crush all assumptions, and really be someone who is out there saying, we have to transform. See, this is the other thing that has to happen here. They have to transform who they are as a company and what they do as a company, because if they don't, they're going to realize they made a terrible mistake in merging, because the goal to merge wasn't to just maintain the status quo.
That's right.
And if the executives are thinking that, this is going to be a disaster. This will be a business case of how not to merge if that happens.
I think you're exactly right. And if the goal is to do everything you've always done, just incrementally better, it's not going to be successful. You have to your
100%.
point. You have to.
And the vision I have for this combined company looks completely different than what it does today. I think they have incredible opportunities to just reinvent that company. And in 3 to 5 years from now, they'll be twice as large as they are if they do it right. They've
Brittain,
got incredible opportunities.
As always, I absolutely find your thoughts fascinating. I love having you on the program. Where can people find more about what you do? You mentioned your website, BrittainLadd.com. I'll also put in the link, your LinkedIn page. But what are the things you care the most about right now? What's exciting you about the future?
Well, I'm certainly looking at all things AI. It's interesting. It's interesting what's going on there. All things supply chain. The big thing I look at the most, and not enough people are really talking about it, is how domestic supply chains are changing. They're adapting to changing consumer trends. International supply chains still operate like they're back in the 1980s. And so I think there has to be a rethinking, a reinvention of international supply chains. And the thing that I'm really looking at is not enough people are understanding how disruptive Temu has become, Shein has become. These two companies are going to become mammoth in size. Wow. And it's forcing companies, or will force companies, to have to change everything they do internationally and greatly accelerate their supply chain. And I'm amazed at how many executives I speak with who have responsibility for international supply chains who've never even left the United States. And so it's amazing how severe companies are going to be impacted by just the fact Temu and Shein have taken an interest in the United States. So those are the things I'm focused on the most right now. But you can reach out to me via LinkedIn. I always respond to people when they do that. That's frankly the easiest way, or just email me at bcladd48@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, Brittain. I, as always, loved having you on the program. Thank you for helping us break down what I think is the most interesting merger in transportation right now. As always, it's a pleasure having you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you go, guys and gals. We broke down what, again, I believe is the most interesting transportation merger in the industry today. If you are interested in learning more, I would urge anybody, shippers, manufacturers, supply chains professionals, understand what the combined entity of Forward Air and Omni Logistics are going to be able to unlock. Hopefully, I didn't come off as this, though. Again, I understand there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things happening. But let me end with our little call out to our friends. Thank you so much to our partners, our friends over at Dial a Truck, ODAT, DAT Truck. I got that hat. I got that box. I got all sorts of good things from that. I hope this was interesting and informative to you. As always, thank you for supporting the podcast and my floating disembodied head. Thanks for the help today, buddy. As always, please tune in, like, share, subscribe. I don't know. Do it the thing the robots tell you to do. I appreciate you. Have a terrific day. And then I hit the button and